A few years back, I did a video on what happens when Linus Torvalds leaves the Linux kernel, whether that be of his own volition because eventually he might retire, whether he is forced to step away once again, or if his time eventually comes. Hopefully that is later rather than sooner, and I know this isn't a happy topic to talk about, this isn't a wow, amazing, exciting thing, but it is something very important for the future of the project. Now, for the majority of the kernel's life, Torvalds hasn't been the only person doing things. Frankly, for most of its life, he's not even been a developer on the project, he's been in more of a maintainership role. Now, there is a generally agreed upon, maybe not agreed, but assumed group of people who would take control of the kernel, but there hadn't been any sort of official transition path, right? People knew who were doing a lot of good work in the kernel, who were very active in the kernel, who would take control of the kernel afterwards, but there was nothing, like, set in stone. Torvalds is only 56. He's got a long time left, but it's better to sort things out now rather than deal with them when they need to happen. And that is exactly what was recently merged into the Linux kernel docs. Documentation, project continuity. Document project continuity procedures. This is a plan for navigating events that affect the forward progress of the canonical Linux repository. Canonical as in the main, not canonical the company. And this is written as a direct follow-up to a discussion that was had at the 2025 Maintainers Summit. This write-up by LWN happened on December 16th, 2025, but the documentation itself, that was only very recently merged about a week and a bit ago. This subject was first addressed by Dan Williams. He described it as an uplifting subject tied to our eventual march toward death. What a happy and exciting way to talk about this problem, and proposed, hey, if you don't want to talk about this now, I have another topic lined up we can talk about instead that might be a bit more exciting. More seriously, he pointed out that people do worry about what might ensue if something were to happen to Torvalds without a designated successor in place, and wanted to talk about a potential way to address those concerns. This is something I brought up on my channel, this is something that's been brought up all over the internet. If you search what happens to the Linux kernel after Linus Torvalds dies, you're gonna see thousands of discussions because it's an important topic. There is a lot of stakeholders that rely on the kernel, there's a lot of stakeholders in the kernel, and if you don't have some sort of designated continuation path, you're gonna see some sort of fight for power. And that's not going to end well for anyone. And whilst Torvalds isn't the only person in the kernel, everything does kind of revolve around the Torvalds Git tree. He basically has the final say for mergers, and if you don't have that Git tree, what happens then? Now, it's not that simple because Torvalds isn't the only one with commit rights to that tree, but you still need to iron out what's going to happen after this point. There were two noteworthy outcomes at the end. The first is that some provisions for disaster have been made, in that there are multiple people who have the ability to commit to Torvalds' repository, and there is redundancy for the stable repository as well. There is not a single point of failure there that would force a move to another repository just to keep the kernel releases coming. So, at least in the short term, you could keep things going for a couple of releases as you iron things out. It's not like all work just immediately stops now that Torvalds is gone. So there's at least something in place, but the leadership structure, what happens then? That's more of a concern. In the most likely scenario, Torvalds will eventually decide that it's time to move on and will arrange for a smooth transition to his replacement. That's what everyone prefers. He let it be known, though, that he has recently signed a new contract with the Linux Foundation and does not intend to go away anytime soon. As I said, he's only 56, right? I think people assume that because the kernel's been around for, you know, a couple of decades at this point, and Torvalds was already early 20s when it started, a lot of people assume he must be way older than he actually is. It was agreed that there should be a process in place to decide on the path forward should something happen that prevents a smooth transition. Williams had a proposal for that process. Should the need arise, the attendees of the most recent Maintainers Summit would be brought together to collectively decide what happens next. The Maintainers Summit is basically the main in-person kernel event. This is a place where a bunch of kernel maintainers all get together, discuss what's going to happen to the kernel, discuss work that's been going on, and it's just generally a good place to have everyone all together at once so you can have as many voices as possible. Those attendees are a group that is trusted by both Torvalds and the community as a whole, and would have the breadth of vision to make a good decision. That decision could be the appointment of a new benevolent dictator, or it could be a transition to some sort of group maintainership. Dave Airley suggested that the group should be locked in a room with the ability to send out white smoke when a decision has been reached. Obviously, this is a joke, but yeah, basically bring everybody together and then say, okay, what are we gonna do now? Do we use the same model we had before? Do we appoint someone like Greg Crowell-Hartman as the new benevolent dictator? Do we swap to some sort of voting-based maintainership system? What do we do? What is going to keep the kernel going in the best way possible? And the plan from there was to have a document written up about the process, and this is that document. Now, if you want to go see it in the kernel documentation, it is, wrong page, it is also over on this side as well. I'm not going to show you this one because it's the same text, and someone's going to complain, oh, Brodie, use dark mode. So we're going to use this one instead. It's the same thing. The Linux kernel development project is widely distributed with over 100 it's certainly over 100 maintainers. That's way undershooting it, but sure. Each working to keep changes moving through their own repositories. The final step, though, is a centralized one where changes are pulled into the mainline repository. That is normally done by Linus Torvalds, but as demonstrated by the 4.19 release in 2018, there are others who can do that work when the need arises. So, a lot of people forget their Linux history. What happened in 2018? So, for anyone who forgot, basically this is when Torvalds was effectively forced to step away from the kernel. If anyone thinks Torvalds is me now, you don't know your Linux history. You have no idea what you're talking about. I don't even care if you're a kernel maintainer and you say this. You've completely forgotten the past. Torvalds back then. Now he's focused on, like, actual problems with your work. Back then, he'd just throw out personal insults. Prime example that I've shown before, but I still love it nonetheless. This is about dbus. We don't merge kernel code just because user space was written by, can't say that word on YouTube, monkey on crack. You can argue whether he was forced to step away or stepped away of his own volition. Whatever you want to call it, it did happen at one point. And during that situation, other people had to run things. For the most part, Greg Crowell-Hartman was just filling the role of Torvalds, and things kinda just went about how they always did. Should the maintainers of that repository become unwilling or unable to do that work going forward, including facilitating a transition, the project will need to find one or more replacements without delay. The process by which that will be done is listed below. Organizer is the last Maintainer Summit organizer, or the current Linux Foundation Technical Advisory Board TAB chair as a backup. Within 72 hours, Organizer will open discussion with the invitees of the most recently concluded Maintainers Summit, a meeting of those invitees and the TAB, either online or in person, will be set as soon as possible in a way that maximizes the number of people who can participate. This is 72 hours, not 72 hours business days. The kernel doesn't operate around business days. Yeah. I would expect this to be online, just because that makes it easier to have as many people as possible. If a Maintainer Summit is just around the corner, yeah, it makes sense to do it there, but having people fly in from all around the world, maybe you could do like a mix in-person online where the people who are in a certain area or can fly to a certain area can do it in person, you bring other people through online, maybe that works as well. But by far the easiest thing to do here is just do it in like a Jitsi call or something like that where everybody can just join. If there's been no Maintainer Summit in the last 15 months, the set of invitees for this meeting will be determined by the TAB. this needs to be included because there might be another COVID situation. During that time, the Maintainer Summit wasn't happening. I think they might have been doing things online. This just has to be here in case the main thing they want to do hasn't been done, but very unlikely is this going to be the case. The invitees to this meeting may bring in other maintainers as needed. This also needs to be here because it's possible that someone who is very important wasn't able to go to the last Maintainer Summit. For example, let's say, I don't know, we'll go with Greg Crowell-Hartman again. Let's say Greg Crowell-Hartman caught the flu like a day before the Maintainer Summit and wasn't able to make it. You want to have Greg be involved. He's very involved in the security team. He's very involved in the LTS maintenance. You want that person involved in the discussion. This meeting, chaired by organizer, will consider options for the ongoing management of the top-level kernel repository, consistent with the expectation that it maximizes the long-term health of the project and its community. Basically, they will discuss what they want to do, and then come to a conclusion. Within 2 weeks, a representative of this group will communicate to the broader community, using the Kernel Summit mailing list, what the next steps will be. The Linux Foundation, as guided by the TAB, will take the steps necessary to support and implement this plan. Now, you might be thinking, wait, that's it? Don't we know who's going to be in charge? Isn't there a clear succession line? Isn't there like, hey, this is the person who's going to run it, this is the person below them, so on and so forth? No, actually, not really, because this isn't something that you can really set in stone until it actually happens, because otherwise, you're kind of going to be constantly updating it. You can say, oh, Greg KH is the new boss, but what if he goes first? What if he wants to retire? What if he's, I don't know, hit by a bus? Then you suddenly need a new plan, and then you need to argue about what that new plan is going to be. But also, what if somebody steps up over the next couple of years, starts doing amazing work, starts becoming like a core kernel maintainer? Well, then you need to somehow add them into the line, and it just becomes a situation of constantly updating the documentation and always arguing about what's going to happen, even though nothing's actually happened yet. What if at some point there is a growing desire for a completely new management structure that doesn't have a BDFL? If you say there is going to be a BDFL in the documentation, then you need to argue about why there isn't going to be one, or why there is going to be one, and it's just a whole big mess that makes a lot more sense to outline the discussion process and outline the general kind of people that are going to be involved in that discussion. Not the specific names, not the specific kernel subsystems, but people who are at an event that involves the kernel. Those people are important to the kernel. When something happens, then they can talk through the problem when it occurs. Rather than having this discussion over and over and over again, outline how to have the discussion, and then have the discussion when it needs to be had. If you ask anyone involved in the kernel, there's probably a generally assumed upon plan, if not formally documented. People who would likely be involved in leadership positions would likely be the people who are already in those positions. You just move some of them up a little bit further, and that's basically it. But only time will tell what's really going to happen. And I'm very curious to see when and what happens, because projects moving leadership is always a really tumultuous time. There's always a lot of arguing about what's going to happen, and I really do hope these arguments are effectively documented, because, oh, I really want to see what happens in that discussion. But what do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be some, like, let's just say, parties that want to take more control of the kernel than they otherwise have? Do you think there's going to be some sort of split in the kernel, or do you think that things are just going to be smooth? I'd love to know. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit of all the above. I would be very, very surprised if you don't have the core maintainers doing the core maintainer things, but then some, like, groups along the outside all trying to, like, grab at any power they can possibly get. But hey, only time will tell. So let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well, and if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribe Sally Therapy linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and hopefully it's not a soon problem.